Welcome to the Tech Blog Writer Podcast, your guide to future tech trends and innovation in a language you understand. Now, over to your host, Neil Hughes.
Welcome back to the Tech Blog Writer Podcast. Like it or not, we are all members of the gig economy now, and for the most part, we automatically trust people we meet, from our Uber driver to Airbnb host. But let's dive a little deeper than that. There are so many different apps now that cover babysitting, dog walking, housekeeping, home sharing, auto sharing, in fact any sharing, not to mention dating and meetups too. And I think most of us at some point in our lives have encountered someone who is not who they claim to be, and that can be both online and offline. But what is the answer? Now, Jenny Thompson is a mission-driven startup executive, author, a natural-born marketer who has documented successes in building brands from scratch and driving measurable growth to benefit shareholders, employees and customers alike. But today, she's the founder of a company called SafetyPIN Technologies. And Jenny has developed an innovative background check methodology that offers a universal trust badge for approved applicants. And by doing so, it verifies peace of mind for the national sharing economy. And prior to SafetyPIN, Jenny spent more than 2 decades supporting the Agora companies, including her role as CEO of New Marketing Health. And during that time, she grew the company from $2 million to $70 million and oversaw the migration of the company's digital marketing transformation, and are ultimately responsible for 14 brands. And I think it's fair to say she's hugely successful and equally incredibly busy, but I'm grateful that she had a little time to spend with me today and share her story with all of us. So buckle up and hold on tight so I can beam your ears all the way to Baltimore so we can speak with Jenny Thompson, founder of SafetyPIN Technologies. So a massive warm welcome to the show. Can you tell the listeners a little about who you are and what you do?
Hi, Neil. My name is Jenny Thompson, and I am the founder and CEO of a company called SafetyPIN Technologies.
Now, as the founder of SafetyPIN Technologies, I think for listeners are unfamiliar with SafetyPIN and just hearing about you guys for the first time, can you set the scene and tell them more about the kind of problems that you solve for your customers? And also, of course, what makes it unique from other solutions out there?
Absolutely. The company has developed a digital trust badge that lets people see at a glance who they can trust when they're using sharing and gig economy sites. And if you think about how often people are using a swipe or a click to book a babysitter, book a dog walker, hire someone to take care of their elderly parents, we use it for almost everything now. And we know very little about that person. And we do know that a lot of the platforms do their own background checks, but we don't know what's included in that necessarily or what their standards are. And so we've developed this peer-to-peer forward-facing trust badge that not only incorporates a comprehensive criminal background check, but we've also developed a proprietary behavioral review that we created with criminal profilers and clinical and forensic psychologists. So even if somebody has a clean record, we can mitigate for people who have the type of behavior that may lead to them putting somebody at risk.
And when you first launched the new Universal Trust Badge, like you said, called SafetyPIN, what completely put you on my radar was the vetted solution was straight away approved by the former White House security chief and forensic profilers. I mean, can you tell me more about that? It sounds an incredible story.
Yeah, I was very fortunate. I reached out to my network and I was looking for some people who had significant success in the law enforcement field. I don't come from law enforcement. I come as a corporate CEO in the natural healthcare space. And so I knew that I really needed people with DNA in that space. And I met a woman who introduced me to John Gill, who's the former chief security officer at the White House. And he also was in the Secret Service for 25 years. And when I sat down and told him what we were doing and how we were combining the behavior with the criminal history and mitigating for the fact that so many crimes go unreported, and to be honest, that a lot of people with criminal tendencies use these apps in order to find people that they can scam, he was on board right away. He loved what we were doing. He wants to be part of it. He's been really supportive. He actually then connected me to Dr. Nancy Zars, who's the former lead forensic psychologist at Leavenworth Maximum Security Prison and has studied the intersection of psychology and criminality her whole career. And she's one of the key people that helped us build out the actual questions that we use and the weighting and scoring methodology in order to eliminate people that cause concern.
And a few moments ago, you did mention that behavioural review, and I must admit that's got me incredibly curious. So can you tell me more about how you see SafetyPIN transforming the security level of the sharing economy, and also expand a little bit more on that unique behavioural review?
So I'm happy to do that. I won't give you any sample questions because we do try to keep them close to the chest.
Yeah. Don't reveal me as a psychopath live on air.
Well, we're very careful to point out that we don't diagnose. And also, if you do take the test and don't meet our requirements, we don't have a negative indicator. So that's between us and you, on our database and you really, and it's not information that we share with anybody. But the way that we see it is, in the United States, 40% of crimes go unreported. And really one of the most shocking statistics is 30% of crimes where there's a weapon used or an injury still go unreported. And so the fact that somebody comes back with a clean criminal background check doesn't mean that they wouldn't put someone in danger. And again, we're making very quick decisions on these apps. We're looking at somebody's profile. We're looking at ratings, which may be reliable, but also can be gamed or can be overly effusive and also frequently have nothing to do with safety. So what we want to do is give people the option of adding a safety pin to their profile on whatever app or website they're using to book jobs so that people can see at a glance, I've taken this extra step to get myself screened so that you know I'm somebody you can trust. And what the behavioral review does is it looks for people who have the behavioral characteristics of somebody who's on the scale of antisocial personality disorder or psychopathy. And those sound much graver than they really are. There are 8 to 12% of the US population falls under that umbrella. And they are people who lack remorse, lack empathy, are willing to victimize other people for their own benefit. And so we've developed the questionnaire with very specific goals in mind of not awarding a safety pin to people who present these characteristics or possibly present these characteristics.
And how challenging is it to stop people from gaming the system and talking about, mentioning words like remorse and empathy? There's no way that people can game that system and just tell you what you want to hear. Is that a challenge to overcome?
So, Neil, I'd be naive if I said there's no way, but I would say that we've really carefully balanced it with a combination of extremely carefully worded questions. I will share the story that we had somebody who was actually in the mail order bride importing business who wanted to use our product and we chose not to work with them. And he said, well, I'm just going to Google translate your questions. And I said, you can do that. It's not going to help. There's such nuance in the individual word choice between can and would and will and might and the way that it's weighted and scored. So people may try to figure out what we're doing. We have some anti-gaming technology built in where if you answer this question one way, you can't answer this question the same way because it would be illogical. We have control questions built in and we update the questions regularly. It's also impossible for somebody to change their answers.
And I'm curious, what's the story behind SafetyPIN and what actually put you on this journey?
I took a vacation after I left my last job. I mentioned I had been a CEO in the natural medicine field and I left that job and was trying to figure out what I was going to do next. And when I returned from vacation, I found out that my dog sitter had not stayed with my dogs as she was supposed to. And when I let her go and told her that she had to pay me back the money that I had prepaid her for my next trip, she faked her own death instead of paying me back $150.
It's a little extreme, isn't it?
Apparently she doesn't know about the block this caller feature on her phone. Yeah, and so I realized through the way everything had unfolded that she exhibited a lot of these traits. And I tried to figure out what could I have done differently to avoid this situation. And as I got to speak with these experts and speak with John and Dr. Zars and learn more about what tools there are to I hate to use the word predict because it's a little bit too strong here. I don't want to, again, diagnose anybody, but to potentially identify someone that would do these kinds of things and it would have this pathological behavior. They're actually pretty accessible tools for us. And so we were able to build the algorithm with that included.
And as the founder of SafetyPIN Technologies, which, if we zoom out, is a woman-owned startup in Baltimore, I'm curious, what kind of challenges have you encountered as a woman in tech that's building a startup outside of Silicon Valley? I mean, have there been any challenges you've had to overcome there?
Have there been any challenges? How much time do we have for this interview? And first I'll say, I think that woman in tech is true, and it's a misnomer because I'm not a developer. I'm not an engineer. So the company is a tech company, but I'm not someone who knows how to write code or how to build software. And I have an amazing CTO that does that for me. I think if you look at the statistics, it's very clear that women get a lot less funding. We are asked questions, how are we going to avoid disaster instead of how are we going to create wins? And I'm someone who spent most of my career working with people who have what I refer to as kind of a gentle sexism. And so I'm very used to it. And I've always been able to allow for it and to mitigate against it. And it's been very different. And I'm not one to cry sexism very lightly. And I think it's more those unconscious biases that absolutely result in people, and interestingly, in men and women, treating women differently. I think when you look at the statistics, women, unless they have funds that are expressly investing in women, they are not actually doing that much better of a job than the males are. And then being in Baltimore, I spent a lot of time in New York because the networking opportunities and getting to meet investors is so much greater. But being in Baltimore, it's a very small ecosystem. It obviously has a reputation through the TV show The Wire and the actual news. And so some people love that because they love the idea of helping a city rebuild itself. And some people don't feel comfortable knowing the market. It very much limits your abilities to get partners and to get funding when people tend to be more focused on Silicon Valley or Silicon Alley.
And those unconscious biases that you mentioned, are you seeing them improving or are they still there?
I think they are still there in a very real way. And I was talking to an investor and he said, I'm just gathering some information for our research. How old are you and do you have children? And I thought they would never ask a male founder that question. Yeah. It's certainly not the second part, but I don't think the first part either. At the same time, I am very cautious not to ascribe everything to sexism or to being on the East Coast. I think I have this fantasy that if I were a guy on the West Coast, my startup would be fully funded and we would be off to the races at extreme levels. And I don't know that that's true, but I think that there is absolutely a small town bias and a female bias, both of which I think are somewhat unconscious, but still very, very present.
And for people listening who are curious about SafetyPIN Technologies and everything that you've created here, can you just maybe walk them through how to apply for a PIN, how it works, and how to get verified?
Absolutely. So the website is getasafetypin.com, and you go there and click apply. The entire process takes about 5 to 7 minutes, and you give us kind of your basic information that you would give anybody. And then you go through a series of questions. And at that point, we process the application. If you are approved for a safety pin, there's a membership fee. If you're not approved, we have a $1 application fee just to start things. And if you're not approved, you never pay more than that $1. So the process is pretty seamless. And again, once you're approved, we give you your notification, you get your 8-digit PIN, you can display it anywhere, share it with anybody. If you're not approved, you're the only person that will know that. Even if you come on through a marketplace partner, we work with a few small babysitting apps. If you come on through one of them and you're not approved, we don't even tell them that you weren't approved. We only send them the list of people who have safety pins. We send them the numbers. And so we're very focused on protecting people's privacy and reputations.
And you mentioned that once you've got that PIN, obviously you could use it on a few of the babysitting apps, but can you just reveal a couple of or a few of the partners that you can use this safety PIN and where it's being used at the moment?
Absolutely. So technically you can use it anywhere.
Yeah.
Once you have a safety pin, you can post it on your profile or as a photo or type your number in on any site at all. We are working with a couple of partners now. We have 2 babysitting partners. One is called NAP with 2 Ps, and one is called Nano. And then we also work with a physical therapy on demand business that's called Movement X, and a concierge business called Domestic Concierges. And then we have a handful of other small businesses and individuals come to us as well. Moms who want to get their nannies screened, people who want to have an Airbnb guest screened, for example. So the one thing is the person has to apply themselves. You can't actually have someone screened without their knowledge. And that is an intentional decision on my part, because I think the way people go behind each other's backs and the privacy issues in this arena are significant, and I didn't want to contribute to them.
Of course, the key to the success of any new project or any technology about adoption. And so what are your plans looking towards the future? What are your plans to get more partners on board and bring this universal trust badge to life? And how long do you anticipate it will take to build that kind of momentum?
Well, we've been live for a little over a year. And my goal is that a year from now, we have significantly higher adoption and are well known in at least buckets of the communities. The plan is to look for more marketplace partners that are the next generation. So the next generation of babysitting apps, of dog walking apps, of elder care and home health care, where we can see that the first generation has not focused enough on trust and safety, and it's been a little bit of an afterthought, and they're trying to make up for that now, working with people who want to build their brands on trust and safety and who understand that this behavioral component is an important indicator of whether or not someone's actually safe to be in your home, alone with your children, alone with your parents.
I'm sure you've got a roadmap and a long list of goals for this year and beyond, and I appreciate you cannot share too much of it with me. But is there anything else you can share with us today about the road ahead for SafetyPIN?
Well, I think the road ahead, one of the things we're going to do is break down into verticals. So, for example, a babysitter obviously needs a much higher level of screening than a Postmates delivery driver. And we don't want to overscreen people that don't need to be. So the first thing that we're going to do is take a step back and kind of create these vertical views and continuing to build out more partnerships so that SafetyPIN becomes something that people recognize as a high standard of trust and safety. We think of ourselves somewhat as the PayPal of trust and safety, where we can have an enterprise relationship so that you go to that site, you know that you can find somebody with a safety pin, or you can have a one-to-one relationship where you can decide you want your babysitter to be screened at this higher level and work with her directly to get her a safety pin through our site. And so the combination of the outreach to the businesses that we want to work with, as well as creating awareness and adoption in the mom army and the blogging world, that's really where we're focused.
And you've been on an incredible journey. So if we've got any startup founders listening to our conversation, it could be located anywhere in the world, far outside of the Silicon Valley, what is the one piece of advice that you would pass down to them? The
one piece of advice I would pass down is be as cheap and lean as possible with everything. When I look back now, and I've always managed my business in lean startup mode. Even I was running a $70 million business with about a 20% EBITDA, and I still acted like we didn't have enough money for lunch most days. I think it's an important mentality. And I think one of the negatives in startup culture is the idea that before you even have your first customer, you need to have swag and kombucha on tap and a ping pong table. And none of those things provide any value. If you're worried about building the right culture, respect people, respect their ideas, include them in conversations. But I think it's become this mentality that if you don't have matching t-shirts and if there's no foosball table in your office, that you'll never make it. And I think that those are misdirected funds that could and should be used for creating marketing opportunities and building relationships and making the product better. And in hindsight, I was very frugal and lean. And I still now look back and say, I wish I had not done this as early as I did. Put off every investment you can till the very last minute of it. If you are building an MVP, really focus on the M more than the V. And I guess the V is important, but really the M is the important part of that. And that was tricky for us, I will say, in the trust and safety space, because people have to have a level of trust. So our MVP still had to be pretty buttoned up, which is just because of the nature of what we're doing. But figure out the thing that you are the most comfortable showing somebody. And if there's a saying that if you're not embarrassed by it, you waited too long. And so you should be embarrassed by your initial MVP. It should be the cheapest thing you can create. And you should be very frugal about your other expenses, knowing that chances are you will not get funding when you need it or as much as you need. And being frugal now will give you much more runway.
Fantastic advice. And before I let you go, just for anyone listening that wants to find out more information after listening to our conversation today, can you just remind them of where they can find you guys online, and also maybe contact a member of your team if they are left with any additional questions?
So the website is getasafetypin.com, and any questions can be sent to info@getasafetypin.com. And we are happy to get in touch with anybody. And if anybody wants to follow up with me directly, just put that in the subject line and it'll get right to me.
Fantastic. Well, I can't thank you enough for coming on today. I love your advice as well about staying cheap and lean as possible in startup, because I think it's such a refreshing antidote to those ping pong tables, coloured bean bags, and that whole image that seemed to have been created over the last few years. And I love your line there about wanting to create the PayPal of trust and safety. So I wish you the best of luck for the future. Hopefully you'll come back in a year's time and tell us how you're getting on. But more than anything, just a big thank you for taking the time to come and talk with me today. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Neil. I really appreciate it.
I love today's story. I mean, yes, SafetyPIN Technologies is a woman-owned startup out of Baltimore that has launched a new universal trust badge called SafetyPIN. And yes, that vetted solution has already been approved by the former White House security chief and forensic profiles that is set to transform the security level of the sharing economy. But what a fantastic idea, and a lovely person with an inspirational story behind that success too. And people often say to me, Neil, after nearly 900 interviews, are there any trends that you've noticed from the leaders and the startup founders that you've spoken with? I would say there's one shining theme throughout the vast majority of guests we've had on here, and that's that every startup founder has encountered a problem and decided to do something about it. So hearing Jenny's story of how her dog sitter actually faked her own death really struck a chord with me, because if that happened to most of us, we would have gone on Facebook and had a long rant about it, but actually done nothing to resolve the problem. So I'm fascinated by how people like Jenny have decided to turn a negative into a positive and fix that problem for everyone else. And I hope that everybody listening tries to adopt that same mindset too, and go on to build the solutions of tomorrow. And if that does happen, I want you to come here on this podcast and tell me all about it. But as always, I'd love to hear your feedback on today's conversation, and you can pop by my website, techblogwriter.co.uk. You can find all 900 interviews, and equally you can send me a quick email, techblogwriter@outlook.com, or look for @Neil C. Hughes across social channels such as LinkedIn, Instagram and Twitter. But we've reached the end of another episode, I'm afraid. But have no fear, I've got another episode queued up for you tomorrow with another great guest who's going to share their story and how technology is transforming their industry. So I hope you'll join me again tomorrow. But a big thank you for listening. And until next time, don't be a stranger.
Thanks for listening to the Tech Blog Writer Podcast. Until next time, remember, technology is best when it brings people together.